The dealership salesman shook my hand when I was 52. I drove off with a $680 monthly payment. Retirement was 3 years away. That one decision almost blew the whole thing. I'm mint. I retired at 55. Not because I had millions, because I understood 5 things most people learn way too late. And here's what nobody tells you. Early retirement isn't ruined by one catastrophic mistake. It's killed by small, reasonable-sounding decisions that compound quietly in the wrong direction. The difference between retiring at 55 and working until 68 often comes down to about $1,200 a month in avoidable expenses. That's it. But those expenses don't feel avoidable when you're making them. So let me walk you through the 5 mistakes I almost made, and in one case did make, and show you the actual math that either saves your plan or quietly destroys it. Mistake number 1. I treated my savings like they were bigger than they were. At age 50, I had about $780,000 saved. Felt like a fortune. Here's the problem. I was mentally spending it like it was $780,000 of spendable cash. It's not. Under the 4% rule, that's $31,200 a year. Divide by 12. That's $2,600 a month before taxes. And I was looking at houses, cars, and vacations like I had $750,000 to burn. The moment you stop seeing your nest egg as a number and start seeing it as monthly income, everything changes. $780,000 sounds huge. $2,600 a month sounds tight, but that's your reality. Most people never make this mental shift. They see the big number in their 401k and think they're rich. Then they retire and panic 6 months in because the money's draining faster than they expected. Your brain isn't wired to think in terms of sustainable withdrawal rates. It's wired to see a pile of cash and assume it'll last forever. If you want simple money math that turns panic into a plan, subscribe. I'm mint. Here's what I did instead. I built a freedom number. Take your annual expenses and multiply by 25. That's your target. My wife and I were spending about $52,000 a year at the time, so we needed $1.3 million to retire safely. We weren't there yet. At $780,000, we were about 60% of the way, and pretending we were ready would have been a disaster. So I kept working, stayed disciplined, watched the number grow, hit $1.3 million at 55. Then I walked, no second guessing, no fear, because the math was clear. But here's the part most people miss. Your expenses determine everything. If I'd been spending $70,000 a year instead of $52,000, my freedom number would have been $1.75 million. That's an extra $450,000 I'd need to save. At a 10% return, that's roughly 4 more years of work. 4 years of your life traded for $18,000 a year in extra spending you probably don't even remember. That's the trade, and most people never see it clearly enough to make a real choice. Mistake number 2. I almost bought that car. The $680 payment I mentioned earlier, that was real. I sat in the dealership, signed the first page. Then I did the math in my head. $680 times 12 is $8,160 a year. Under the 4% rule, that payment alone requires $204,000 in savings to support forever. I didn't have an extra $204,000 just lying around for a car, so I walked out. The salesman looked confused. My wife asked if I was okay. I said, yeah, I just didn't want to work 3 extra years for leather seats. I bought a used sedan for $18,000 cash instead. Number payment. No regret. That one decision probably bought me an extra 2 years of freedom. Because here's what a car payment really costs. It's not just the $680, it's the portfolio drag. Every dollar you spend is a dollar that can't compound. $204,000 growing at 7% for 10 years becomes $402,000. That's the real cost of the car, not $40,000. Nearly $500,000 in opportunity cost over a decade. And nobody at the dealership mentions that part. Here's the trap people miss. A car payment doesn't feel like retirement poison when you're 50 and still working. It feels normal. Everyone has one, but every dollar of fixed expenses you carry into retirement is a dollar your portfolio has to cover forever. And here's the darker part. If you're 3 years from retirement and you take on a 5-year loan, you're retiring with a payment. That payment becomes part of your burn rate. Your burn rate determines your freedom number, and your freedom number determines when you can actually quit. It's all connected. One decision in a dealership can delay your retirement by years, and you won't realize it until it's too late. Mistake number 3. I underestimated healthcare. This one almost got me. I assumed I'd just coast on savings until Medicare kicked in at 65, but I was planning to retire at 55. That's a 10-year gap. Private health insurance for 2 people in your 50s? About $1,400 a month if you're healthy, more if you're not. Call it $17,000 a year. I hadn't built that into my budget. I was running my numbers based on $52,000 in annual expenses, but I forgot to add healthcare because I was still on my employer's plan. If I had retired without accounting for it, I would have been $17,000 short every year for a decade. That's $170,000 I didn't plan for. And it gets worse. Healthcare costs don't stay flat. They rise fast. What costs $1,400 a month at 55 might cost $2,000 a month by 60. You're not just planning for today's number. You're planning for a moving target that only moves in one direction: up. This is where people's early retirement dreams die. Not in a market crash, not in some dramatic disaster, in the slow, grinding reality of a $1,600 monthly insurance bill they didn't see coming. You can't handwave healthcare. It's not a nice to have. It's the third largest expense after housing and food for most early retirees. Factor it in from day one, or it will eat your plan alive. I eventually built it into my freedom number. Instead of $1.3 million, I recalculated at $1.4 million to cover the gap. That extra $100,000 took me about 18 months longer to save. Worth every second, because I retired with confidence instead of crossing my fingers and hoping it worked out. Mistake number 4. I ignored sequence of returns risk. Here's what that means in English. If the market crashes in year 1 or 2 of your retirement, your portfolio might never recover, even if the market does. Let me show you why. Say you retire with $1 million. You're pulling $40,000 a year. The market drops 30% in year 1. Now you're at $700,000. You still need your $40,000, so you pull it. Now you're at $660,000. The market recovers 20% in year 2. Sounds good, right? Wrong. You're now at $792,000. You pull another $40,000, you're at $752,000. 3 years in, the market's basically flat, but you're down $248,000. That's sequence risk. The order of returns matters as much as the returns themselves. Now run the same scenario, but flip it. Market goes up 20% in year 1. You're at $1.2 million. Pull $40,000, you're at $1.16 million. Market drops 30% in year 2. You're at $812,000. Pull $40,000, you're at $772,000. Still down, but not nearly as bad. Same returns, different order. Wildly different outcome. That's the risk nobody talks about when they're selling you on the 4% rule. I almost retired in late 2007. If I had, I would have walked straight into the 2008 crash. My portfolio would have been gutted right when I needed it most. Not because I did anything wrong, just because I got unlucky with timing. Instead, I waited, kept working through 2008 and 2009, retired in 2010 after things stabilized. My portfolio had recovered. The market wasn't at all-time highs, but it wasn't in free fall either. Timing isn't everything, but it's not nothing. If you're retiring into a shaky market, build a bigger cash cushion. 2 years of expenses in cash means you don't have to sell stocks at the bottom just to buy groceries. That cushion is the difference between a plan that survives and one that doesn't. I kept $110,000 in cash when I retired. Felt excessive. Felt safe. And when the market dipped in 2011, I didn't care. I had runway. Mistake number 5. I didn't stress test the plan. I ran the numbers once, saw that I could retire. Then I just assumed it would work. But I never asked the hard questions. What if healthcare costs double? What if we want to travel more in our 60s? What if one of us needs long-term care? What if the market returns 5% instead of 8%? I didn't run a pessimistic scenario. I didn't even run a realistic scenario. I ran an optimistic scenario and called it a plan. That's not a plan. That's a wish. Here's what changed my thinking. I was talking to a guy who retired at 53. Seemed like he had it all figured out. 10 years later, he was back at work. Not because he wanted to be, because his plan fell apart. His wife got sick, insurance didn't cover everything. They burned through $80,000 in 2 years on medical bills. Then the market dropped. He panicked and sold, locked in losses. By 63, he was out of options. He told me the math worked on paper, but life didn't follow the paper. That story scared me more than any market crash ever could. So here's the move. Stress test your freedom number with 3 scenarios. Best case, market returns 8, expenses stay flat, no major surprises. Realistic case, market returns 6% a year, one big financial surprise every 5 years. Could be a new roof, could be a car replacement, could be helping a kid. Something always comes up. Worst case, market returns 4% a year, major health event at some point, maybe some long-term care down the line. Run all 3. If your plan survives the worst case, you're good. If it doesn't, you're not ready yet. And that's fine. Better to know now than at 62 when you're already 3 years in and running out of runway. I ran my numbers through all 3 scenarios. Best case, I could retire at 53. Realistic case, 55. Worst case, 58. I split the difference and retired at 55. Gave myself margin. Gave myself peace of mind. Here's the thing nobody tells you about early retirement. It's not about hitting a magic number and walking away. It's about building a system that can handle reality. Reality is messy. Markets crash, people get sick. Expenses rise, stuff breaks. Plans change. The question isn't whether your plan works in a spreadsheet. The question is whether it works when life punches you in the face 3 times in the same year. So here's where I landed. I didn't retire early because I got lucky. I didn't retire early because I made a fortune in tech or inherited money. I retired early because I made boring, unglamorous decisions for about 7 years straight. I drove old cars. I stayed in a smaller house than we could technically afford. I didn't take on new debt. I built a cash buffer that felt bigger than I needed. I waited for the right market window instead of forcing it. And I stress tested everything twice. It wasn't exciting. Nobody's making Instagram posts about driving a 2004 Camry, but it worked. And here's what I know now, 5 years in. The freedom is real. The plan held. We travel when we want. We're not stressed about money. We don't check the market every day. Because we built margin into the system, we didn't retire on the edge. We retired with room to breathe. That room cost us about 2 extra years of work. Best trade I ever made. If this kind of math makes sense to you, subscribe. I'm Mint. I'll keep it simple.